Usually, when a building catches fire, the cause and effect are pretty much entirely localized to a single city block.
Right, yeah.
I mean, you have a spark, some fuel, a blaze, the fire department shows up, the damage is assessed, and, the story effectively ends right there at the property line.
Exactly. It's closed loop.
But last week, a fire at a manufacturing plant in Western Russia triggered this massive diplomatic shockwave that instantly reached all the way to London.
Which is wild. It completely shatters that localized loop we just talked about.
It really does. It's a perfect illustration of how, in the world of modern geopolitical warfare, a single physical event travels along these invisible, highly volatile diplomatic tripwires across the globe.
Yeah, a localized strike transforms into a geopolitical chain reaction in like a matter of hours. And it depends entirely on who is analyzing the debris.
And mapping out that exact chain reaction is our mission today. Welcome to today's Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
We are looking at a deeply comprehensive article today from the KULT platform. It details a massive missile strike in the Russian city of Bryansk. But before we get into the weeds, I do need to pause for a second and address you, the listener, directly.
Yeah, this is important.
Because we are looking at source material filled with very intense, completely contradictory claims from both Russian and Ukrainian officials. So our job today isn't to figure out who is right or to, validate any particular narrative.
Right. We are strictly here to map the architecture of these competing claims.
Exactly. We want you to understand the underlying mechanics of this crisis. We are absolutely not taking sides here.
We're just reading the blueprint.
Just reading the blueprints, because understanding the architecture of this event is crucial. The facts on the ground are being actively weaponized to serve entirely different strategic realities.
Yeah, the physical strike is almost secondary to the information war happening around it.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the raw facts of the event itself before we look at the fallout. So on the night of March 10th into the 11th, the western Russian city of Bryansk, which sits about 230 miles southwest of Moscow, was struck from the air.
And the human toll was incredibly severe.
It was. According to the regional governor of Bryansk, Alexander Bogomaz, the casualty numbers shifted significantly as the dust settled and emergency services worked through the night.
Yeah, the initial reports for the governor indicated 6 dead and 37 wounded.
Which is already a tragedy.
Right, but as is often the case in mass casualty events of this scale, those numbers escalated. The official toll was later updated to 7 dead and 42 injured.
Wow.
And the devastation to the city was profound enough that Governor Bogomaz formally declared a day of mourning for the entire Bryansk region.
So you have a city in mourning dealing with a significant loss of life. But it's the specific weapon used to cause that destruction that instantly elevated this from a regional tragedy to a full-blown international diplomatic crisis.
Yeah, the hardware is key here.
The source confirms that approximately 7 long-range cruise missiles were used in this strike. And these weren't domestically produced Ukrainian weapons.
No, they were not.
They were British-supplied Storm Shadow cruise missiles.
And the origin of that hardware is the precise detail the Kremlin seized upon to escalate the diplomatic stakes.
They didn't hold back?
Not at all. The official Russian narrative bypassed Kyiv almost entirely in its most severe rhetoric. Instead, they elevated this to a formal, blistering accusation against the United Kingdom.
The language from the Russian Foreign Ministry is about as severe as diplomacy gets before lines are completely severed. I mean, they formally accused the UK of orchestrating a deliberately planned terrorist attack.
That is heavy phrasing.
Very. They claim this strike violates international law and that the entire operation was specifically aimed at derailing any potential peace efforts.
And intentionally escalating the broader conflict.
Right. And then the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, he took it a step further than just, generalized diplomatic condemnations.
He got very specific.
He did. He explicitly stated to reporters that the launch of these Storm Shadow missiles was impossible without British specialists. His exact quote from the source was, let me read this. We are aware of this, we know it well, and naturally we take it into account.
Which sounds like a veiled threat.
It really does. And the Russian embassy in London issued a statement that reads more like a declaration of absolute enmity than a diplomatic memo.
What did they say?
They declared that the blood of the Bryansk residents, including children, is quite literally on the hands of British military personnel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They stated explicitly that this makes London fully complicit with what they termed the neo-Nazi regime in Kyiv.
So they are pulling zero punches.
None. But hold on. Let me challenge this a bit. Because Ukraine is the one actively at war with Russia, right?
Right.
Ukraine is the military force that actually fired those 7 missiles. Why is Russia directing so much specific official fury at London rather than just, aiming all their anger at Kyiv?
It's a great question.
Is this really just about the physical missiles, or is this a broader messaging tactic designed to test NATO's resolve?
What's fascinating here is how modern proxy conflicts inherently blur the lines of operational responsibility, specifically to create strategic leverage.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, the Kremlin is making a very specific technological argument to support a massive geopolitical goal by insisting that Storm Shadow missiles fundamentally require foreign and specifically British specialists to program the flight paths, input the target data, or, authorize the launch.
They're arguing that Ukraine didn't just pull the trigger on a gifted weapon.
Exactly. They're saying the UK was effectively standing in the room, holding the gun alongside them.
Which turns a regional cross-border strike into a direct operational entanglement with a nuclear-armed NATO member.
Which is a huge leap. And for the Kremlin, making this public accusation serves a vital dual purpose. First, it directly feeds their domestic narrative. It tells the Russian public that they are not struggling against a smaller neighbor, but that they are valiantly defending themselves against the combined aggressive military apparatus of the entire West.
So it provides a rationale for why the war is so difficult and costly.
Exactly that. It explains away the friction. And strategically, on the international stage, it places immense diplomatic and psychological pressure on the UK and other Western capitals.
It's a calculated attempt to induce hesitation.
Precisely. It's a way of signaling, if you continue to provide these advanced long-range weapons, we will hold you directly, morally, and legally responsible for the civilian casualties where they land.
They are trying to make the political cost of supplying weapons just way too high for Western politicians to stomach.
Right.
Which perfectly establishes the international outrage. The Russian narrative is entirely focused on the tragic civilian toll, the complicity of the UK, and framing the strike as an inhumane act of terror.
That's their focus, 100%.
But when you flip the script and look at the Ukrainian narrative regarding the exact same event, it is a completely different universe.
It is a stark study in how war forces a divergence in reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If Russia claims this was a terror attack on a civilian center, why does Ukraine claim it was a strictly military operation?
We have to look at the coordinates.
Exactly. To answer that, we have to look past the diplomatic shouting match and look at the actual coordinates those 7 Storm Shadow missiles were programmed to hit. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the operation publicly.
And he didn't call it a tragedy.
No, he called it a completely justified response to the aggressor. And that justification rests entirely on what was sitting inside the Bryansk city limits.
The Kremny L plant.
The Kremny L plant.
Yeah, the KULT article details Kremny L as one of Russia's largest and most vital microelectronics manufacturers.
Massive, right?
Huge. We are looking at a sprawling facility that employs around 1,700 highly specialized workers, but, its size isn't what makes it a target.
It's the customer base.
Exactly. Kremny L sells virtually all of its output directly to the Russian Ministry of Defense.
So they aren't manufacturing the microchips that go into consumer laptops, smart TVs, or commercial vehicles.
Not at all.
Zelensky stated that this specific plant manufactures the control systems for all types of Russian missiles, the exact same platforms that are currently being used to target Ukrainian infrastructure.
Which makes it a high-value military target.
Right. The General Staff of Ukraine reported that their strike caused significant damage to the production facilities. But to really grasp the gravity of this, we need to understand what those facilities actually produce.
Yeah, the technical side is crucial here.
The source notes the plant specializes in discrete semiconductor technology and integrated microchips. So help us understand that, because that sounds highly technical. Why are these so crucial?
Let's break down discrete semiconductor technology, because it is literally the linchpin of modern military capability. Unlike the integrated circuit in your smartphone, which is designed to do a million different processing tasks adequately.
Like running apps, taking photos all at once.
Right. A discrete semiconductor, on the other hand, often does one specific, highly demanding job incredibly well.
Like what?
For instance, managing massive, sudden voltage spikes in a missile's propulsion system, or handling extreme thermal loads during atmospheric flight.
So they have to be incredibly tough.
Very tough. These components are the rugged, highly specialized gatekeepers of electrical current inside a weapon.
So if you are missing that one specific rugged gatekeeper, the entire multi-million-dollar missile system simply cannot function safely or accurately.
It becomes utterly useless.
Mm-hmm.
The source specifically calls these microchips the brain and nervous system of modern weapons.
The nervous system.
Yeah. Modern warfare is no longer about mass. It's not about who has the most steel or the most artillery shells.
Yeah.
It is entirely about precision. It doesn't matter if you have a massive ballistic missile, if it cannot navigate, adjust its altitude in real time, or accurately find its target.
I love that nervous system description from the source. It makes me think of an analogy.
Oh, let's hear it.
It's like a master watchmaker losing their absolute finest pair of precision tweezers.
I like that.
I mean, they might still have all the gears, the microscopic springs, the incredibly complex housing sitting right there on the desk. But without that one specific precision tool to actually place those components together, the entire assembly process comes to a dead, grinding halt.
It's a perfect way to look at it.
You aren't just destroying a building. You are inducing a stroke in the adversary's future military manufacturing capabilities.
That is exactly the strategic logic at play here. By targeting Kremny L, Ukraine isn't trying to destroy the weapons on the battlefield, which is highly dangerous and costly.
They're going upstream.
Exactly. They are attempting to sever the nervous system of the Russian military machine at its absolute source. The KULT article points out that Kremny L manufactures components for some of Russia's most elite systems.
What kind of systems?
We're talking about the Pantsir air defense system, the S-500 air defense system, which is a crown jewel of their defensive network, the Kalib cruise missiles,
Wow.
and crucially, the Iskander ballistic missile systems.
And analysts in the article specifically noted that destroying the main electronics workshop at this plant could actively disrupt the production of new Iskander missiles.
This is huge.
It's preventative warfare through supply chain destruction. I mean, Ukraine is willing to risk the intense international condemnation from Russia because the payoff stopping the production of Iskander missiles before they are even built is simply too high to ignore.
It really highlights the supreme bottleneck of modern state conflict. You can draft 100,000 new infantrymen in a month, but you cannot manifest highly complex microchips out of thin air if the facility that prints them is a smoldering crater.
No, you definitely can't. But this brings us to a fascinating secondary layer of this event. And this is where the story pivots from international diplomacy to domestic reality.
The home front.
Exactly. We've seen the blame game with London. We've seen the tactical military logic of taking out the watchmaker's tweezers. Now we have to look at how this exact event is causing intense, visible friction within Russia itself.
Yeah, the internal reaction is very telling.
We're connecting the physical damage of the plant to the psychological and political damage on the Russian home front.
The fog of war is thickest when a state's official messaging inevitably collides with the reality visible to its own citizens.
That's a great point.
The KULT article highlights a glaring omission in the Russian state's response. While authorities were loudly and publicly condemning the inhumane terrorist act and focusing the cameras on the tragic civilian casualties.
Which is horrible, yes.
Absolutely. But they deliberately did not publicly acknowledge the severe damage to the Kremny L military facility itself.
Right. They completely omitted the military-industrial impact from the official narrative.
Completely.
They wanted the story to be purely about victimhood, not about a critical vulnerability in their defense supply chain.
But they couldn't hide it.
They couldn't. Because, and this detail absolutely blew my mind when I read it in the source, this is not an isolated incident. The Kremny L plant has been attacked at least 6 times since 2022.
6 times. That includes a Ukrainian special operation back in 2023 and another major drone attack as recently as October 2024.
That's insane.
This facility, which is undeniably critical to the Russian war effort, has been repeatedly breached.
And this repeated failure to protect such a vital facility has caused absolute fury among Russian military bloggers.
They were not happy.
Not at all. The source quotes a prominent blogger, Anastasia Kashavarova. And she didn't direct her anger at the UK's diplomatic maneuvers. She didn't just blame Ukrainian forces.
Yeah, Zunis looked internally.
She looked entirely inward at the Russian defense apparatus. She publicly described the success of this attack as the result of criminal negligence and inconceivable stupidity.
Which is an astonishingly harsh public critique of internal security during wartime.
Yeah.
especially in an environment where criticizing the military can carry severe legal penalties.
And I have to push back on this dynamic because it feels like a massive contradiction.
How so?
Well, we have the regional governor, Alexander Bogomaz, calling this an inhumane terrorist act orchestrated by the West from the outside, while a prominent pro-war Russian military blogger is simultaneously calling it inconceivable stupidity from the inside.
Right.
How does a state maintain its tightly controlled official narrative when its own pro-military voices, people who actively support the war effort, are loudly pointing out massive, systemic, internal security failures to millions of followers?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a profound tension within the modern Russian information space. You have the official state media, which relies on strict top-down message control.
All right, the traditional news broadcasts.
Exactly. Their job is to project strength and frame all setbacks as the result of unprecedented Western aggression. But then you have the Telegram and military blogger ecosystem, which operates with a vastly different mandate.
Why does the Kremlin even tolerate them if they're calling out state stupidity?
Because they serve as a crucial pressure valve. These mill bloggers are fiercely nationalistic. They're often more hawkish than the Kremlin itself.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they don't oppose the war. They oppose incompetence in executing the war. They have deep connections to frontline commanders and the military-industrial base, so their audience trusts them for unvarnished truth.
So shutting them down would be a huge risk.
The state tolerates them because shutting them down would alienate the most patriotic segments of the population. But they are incredibly dangerous to the official narrative because they care about results, not rhetoric.
That makes total sense.
And Kasharova hit on a long-term systemic problem that goes far beyond just fixing a damaged roof at the plant. She publicly questioned the massive resources that will now be required to restore production.
Right, the logistics of actually rebuilding.
But more importantly, she pointed out the immediate devastating need to train new specialists.
Which circles back to the 1,700 employees working there. Replacing the machines is one thing, but replacing the human capital is another.
Replacing advanced microchip manufacturing equipment under heavy international sanctions is already a logistical nightmare.
I can imagine.
They have to rely on complex, gray market supply chains just to get the parts. But replacing highly trained human specialists during an active war is exponentially harder.
Because it's such specialized work.
Running a discrete semiconductor plant isn't assembly line work. It requires operating in incredibly strict clean rooms where a single microscopic speck of dust can ruin an entire production batch.
So you can't just draft a civilian off the street, put them in a hazmat suit, and tell them to run a photolithography machine the next day.
It is impossible. Operating extremely finicky manufacturing equipment requires veteran engineers who have developed an intuitive understanding of how to recalibrate those machines under pressure.
It takes years.
It takes years of highly specialized education and hands-on experience. If the human capital at that plant, those 1,700 specialists, was severely impacted by the strike, the disruption to the Russian Ministry of Defense's supply chain is catastrophic.
Wow.
It isn't just about waiting for new machines to be smuggled in. It's an irreversible drain of irreplaceable expertise.
And the bill bloggers know this.
The mill bloggers see this. They understand the strategic math, and that is exactly why they are furious about the criminal negligence of leaving the facility vulnerable to a sixth attack.
They know what's at stake.
They know that you cannot fight a 21st century war if your most brilliant engineers and your precision supply chains are completely unprotected.
So what does this all mean? When we look at all the pieces we've gathered from the KULT article today, it becomes clear that understanding this single event, a nighttime missile strike in Bryansk, requires so much more than just looking at a map and a casualty report.
It's incredibly layered.
It really is. You have to look at the deeply tragic civilian cost and a city declaring a day of mourning. You have to navigate the complex, high-stakes web of international weapons supply, where the use of a British-made missile turns a regional strike into a global diplomatic crisis and a test of NATO's resolve.
Absolutely.
And beneath all the rhetoric, you have to understand the incredibly fragile nature of high-tech military manufacturing, where destroying a microchip workshop and disrupting a highly specialized workforce can effectively ground an entire fleet of ballistic missiles before they are ever built.
It perfectly illustrates how interconnected and intensely vulnerable the entire ecosystem of modern conflict truly is.
Yeah.
A fire in Bryansk instantly changes the diplomatic temperature in London and alters the tactical reality on the front lines in Ukraine.
It's that invisible tripwire we talked about at the beginning, setting off alarms across multiple realities. But as we wrap up, I know you always catch these underlying patterns in the research that most people, just gloss over.
I try to.
What is the final lingering thought you want to leave the listener with today?
Well, there is a profound, almost tragic irony buried deep in the facts of the source material that I think is worth pondering long after you finish listening.
Okay.
We established earlier that the Kremny L plant manufactures the critical components, the literal nervous system, for the Pantsir and the S-500.
Yes, the chips that make those systems function.
And those systems are, by definition, some of the most advanced, highly capable air defense systems in the entire Russian arsenal.
All right.
Their sole dedicated purpose is to detect, track, and destroy incoming threats from the sky.
Yeah, that's their whole job.
Yet this exact plant, the very birthplace of these elite air defense systems, has been successfully attacked from the air at least 6 times since 2022.
Oh, wow.
So I would ask you to consider the broader, perhaps uncomfortable implication of that fact. If a facility that literally builds the brains for a nation's most advanced air defense systems cannot manage to defend its own roof from repeated cruise missile strikes,
Right.
what does that reveal about the true balance between offensive missile technology and defensive capabilities in modern warfare?
Wow. If the ultimate shield maker can't even manage to hold up a shield over their own workshop, I mean, that completely changes how you view the balance of power on the entire battlefield.
It really does.
The offense seems to have an overwhelming structural advantage. That is an incredible, haunting point to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We hope this exploration helped clear the fog of war and gave you a much sharper lens on how these highly complex, interconnected events actually unfold. Keep questioning the narratives, keep looking for those invisible tripwires, and we will catch you next time.